All right, to my guests, thank you so much for being on the show, y'all. We have a whole legend on the air. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How you doing? How you feeling?
I am doing and feeling great. We just did a
Good.
great Scare Up the Vote campaign event where all these big horror figures, icons were involved. Stephen King and Mike Flanagan, who did Doctor Sleep, and Brian Fuller, who did Hannibal, a bunch of writers. It was amazing.
Listen, I was telling you this off the air, but I think you are so cool because I'm like, yo, I never seen black people, let alone black women, exist in this space. So the fact that I saw you talking to Stephen King, Jordan Peele popped up in your class, you be kikiing with Tony Todd. I'm like, yo, who is this lady?
I know I'm living my best life. That's who I am.
Yes, seriously. So, what inspired you to become a central figure in Black horror?
Oh, well, it was not a plan. I'll tell you that. I started publishing in 1995, and back in the
Hmm.
mid 90s, publishers were just discovering, oh, Black people read.
Right.
So, there were all kinds of books, mysteries, romances, thrillers, and they just, I just got in with that mix. I like to say on the coattails of Terry McMillan and Waiting to
Yeah.
Exhale, even though my work is nothing like her work, except that it's about contemporary Black characters, a lot of it. But other than that, I've just kept at it, my dear. I've been publishing since then, had my first novel, and I want to say 10 years come out last year, The Reformatory.
Hmm.
And I'm also an executive producer on Horror Noir. Now, that's where a lot of people first heard my name
Hmm.
because Horror Noir, A History of Black Horror, is a Shudder documentary. In fact, it was Shudder's first original documentary, and
Mm.
it is excellent. And as an executive producer, I got to be a talking head. And I've been memed, I said Black history is Black horror. And I don't mean when I say Black history is Black horror, I don't mean the inventions. I mean the experience.
Yeah, the realities of what we
Right.
go through
Yeah,
on
the
the
reality.
right. What I wanted to ask you, because I don't want to discredit anybody else, but I feel like because you asked me how did I found you, and I don't know how it happened, but an idea just popped in my head, and I'm like, it got to be somebody that's a historian of like horror and scary movies, and you were the only person that I discovered. So, is there anybody else in this field that is doing the same thing you're doing, either before you or like,
Oh, yes. Actually, I have to shout out the woman whose book we adapted. She wrote the book, literally, Black Horror Noir.
okay,
And her name is Dr. Robin R. Means Coleman. I would really
mm-hmm.
call her a pioneer because as an academic, she told me her university wouldn't even accept that manuscript toward her tenure. You have to publish to get tenure. They wouldn't even accept it because they didn't think it was
Wow,
a serious enough topic. And now it's just blown up. I would say especially since Get Out came out in
oh
2017
yeah,
and it won an Oscar, I think a lot more people are willing to take Black horror seriously.
yeah. Now, your mother had a strong love for horror. So, how did that passion for the genre shape your relationship with it growing up?
Okay, come through research.
Listen, when you told me you had time, you was like, because she was like, she's a super busy person, right? So she was like, let me see, because she has an assistant. I'm like, listen, we can do this at midnight. Just tell me the time and the date, and I was
Well, I
ready.
I so appreciate you, and I don't ever get tired of talking about my mom and her impact on me because
Yeah.
first you have to know Patricia Stevens Dew, who sadly passed away in 2012. The biggest horror of my life was losing my mother. Let me just say that just out
Mm,
front. Horror is the big loss I think that we all relate to. And some of
facts.
us, that's why we love horror, is because it helps heal in some ways. But we can get to that.
Hmm.
She spent 49 days in jail in 1960 as one of the Florida A&M University students, including my aunt Priscilla, who refused to pay a fine when they were arrested for trying to order at a lunch counter during the lunch counter sit-ins in the early 1960s. So
Hmm.
she was tear gassed by a police officer as a 20-year-old college student, and for the rest of her life, she wore dark glasses. I'd say 80% of the time, even indoors, because she
Mm.
had this sensitivity to light after suffering this police violence during the civil rights movement, which all people were trying to do was like have the right to enter public spaces, public
Just to be treated
accommodations,
as an equal.
to be treated like a human being, basically. And
Right.
and that whole generation sacrifice. And she's also the first horror fan in my life. Like she was all up in those creature features on the weekends,
Mm-hmm.
Dracula, the Wolfman. I mean, she literally raised us on that stuff. She gave me my first Stephen King novel, The Shining, when I was 16.
Yeah.
I still see that silver paperback she gave me back in the day. And I used to think it was this weird quirk. Oh, my mom is this very highly celebrated civil rights activist, but she also liked horror. And since she's passed, and after hearing more testimonies from other, like you say, Black women who also learned to love horror from their mothers
Mm-hmm.
and their grandmothers and their aunties, I'm realizing, oh, it wasn't like a bug, it's a feature. It's like she loved horror because she had been through this trauma of the civil rights movement, because she went through the trauma of
Mm-hmm.
growing up under Jim Crow with these signs saying white only and colored, basically proclaiming to her that she was not a full human being from the time she was young. So that trauma, that
Yeah.
pain, I never got the chance to discuss this with her.
That was my next question.
I just, there's so many things you take for granted when people are with you. And then
Yeah.
you realize all these questions like, well, why do you think? What was the first horror movie you ever saw? Like, I to this day do not know, but I do know out the gate. Like one time when my son was what, 2, 3,
Mm-hmm.
grandma and grandpa took care of him for about 9 days, and he came home talking about demons. And I'm like, Grandma, why? And then of course she was watching horror in front of him. She was watching, I forget what it was. She was watching some series that she loved. I was like, Mom, come on now. And but that's the same thing that happened with me. We were watching these very scary movies from a young age. And now that I've been through something, not like what she went through in the 60s, but like I said, losing her
Yeah.
was that thing that'll grow you up real quick. Now you know you've been through something. And since that time, like dealing with caretaking for an elder, a movie like The Dark and the Wicked, which is also
Mm-hmm.
on Shudder, it's really, really like if you like Hereditary,
Mm-hmm.
it's that kind of horror. It's like grim horror. And it's about caretaking, but it makes me feel better because at least there was no demon when I was trying to take care of my mom
Yeah.
or when my dad needs help. It just takes life and shows you, it could be worse.
Yeah. Yeah. It could always be
It
worse.
could be worse. And other than that, I think it's the examples of courage, honestly. I mean, you don't think about courage all the time when you imagine people in horror movies, characters in books, because
Mm-hmm.
we see people trip and fall and get scared and scream. But when you really think about it, the whole point of a horror story is what are you going to do now?
Right.
What are
Right.
you going to do now? Now you know there's a demon and you
Mm-hmm.
know this. Are you allowed to cuss on this show?
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. I had cursed in front of you. I'm like, oh, I wanted to be respectful, but now that I know that you curse, let's we
let's
can curse.
now that you have a demon
Let's
riding your ass,
kiki.
what you gonna do about it?
Right, right,
You
right,
got to come up with a plan. You gotta like share information with other people in your party. You don't have to answer the door just because somebody knocks on it. Number one, people in horror movies. Why? Why
right.
are you opening the door?
And y'all love to split up.
Why are you splitting up? Why are you walking around the house going, hello, without a
Right,
weapon in your damn hand? What? What if
right,
they
right.
answer you? What are you going to do about it? So I know for someone who writes horror and
Hmm.
someone who's a horror fan, what really electrifies me is watching I love the monsters and the demons and the zombies, but it's the characters, what they have to
Yeah,
discover in themselves.
right, right. Two things. While you're talking, I'm thinking to myself because I always love like scary shit. And I'm like, how was I introduced to that? I can't even remember. I think the first movie I saw that was scary was It with the clown.
Mm.
And ever since then, I just love like even to this day, sometimes I watch scary movies to help me relax, which sounds crazy. But
No,
I'm
I
like,
get you.
yeah, well, you'll get me. Yeah. The listeners like this girl is crazy. But I can't remember how I was introduced to it.
Well, I mean, a lot of young people love horror because it's like a roller coaster ride
Hmm.
and it's a safe way to feel scared. I think that's what I always thought. For,
Right.
for me, before I lost my mom, it was just fun. It's like, wee, but I should have known there was more to it for her. It's not just an escape. It's not, it's that. when you're into horror, and not everybody is, and I'm
Right.
sorry for y'all who aren't into horror. I'm sorry you're missing out, but
Facts. Because
but
I always say that horror, I feel like scary movies have the best character development if it's done right.
yes, and they should get more prizes. Like Lupita and Us, she should have been
Oh,
nominated twice
please.
for that movie. She should have gotten one nomination for Adelaide and one nomination for Red, because she played
Facts.
two whole ass parts in that movie, both
Facts.
excellent.
Excellent.
Um, and I can't remember, I always forget the name of this actress, but the one who was in Hereditary, and she was also the mom in The Sixth Sense. She's an Australian actress.
Oh, the white lady.
Yes,
Yes, she
she
did
should
that.
have she should have won her Oscar years ago, you know?
Yes. I think a lot of people should have won the Oscars, but hey.
That's true. But genre doesn't get love usually from the Oscars, so some of those performances, I guess, don't get the recognition they deserve. But I agree with you. If it's done right, like there's nothing worse than watching a horror movie where you don't believe in or like the characters. Sometimes that
Right.
can be because the actors are bad. That's the first thing that will turn me off. I cannot stand bad acting in a
Facts.
horror movie.
Facts. Because
It,
Jamie Lee Curtis, she sells me every time in Halloween.
Absolutely. Oh, shoot. Yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis. Well, look at her. Later won her Oscar. She didn't win it for that, but she just won her Oscar finally.
Right.
Um, yeah, so the characters are the main draw. It's like who they have to become, seeing images of people stand up to powers that are bigger than they are
Yeah.
and that they didn't even know about yesterday, you know, like,
Yeah.
and to, they don't always even have to win. I like to say, because, sometimes you get that horror movie with a downer ending. Sometimes everybody just dies, right? But
Right.
even that is like not the point, because spoiler, we all have a bad ending. Okay,
Yeah.
spoiler.
Right.
It's not about that. It's about who are you while you're in the fight? How hard can you go against
Yeah.
whatever it is? And what do you learn about yourself while you're doing it? I love that.
I love it. So, what are some lessons that you learned from your mother's appreciation of horror that you incorporate into your own work today?
Wow, that's a really, really good question. A lot of
Listen,
the horror.
I watch all your interviews. I'm like, no,
Oh,
we're gonna do
okay.
some things different.
Wow. The horror she grew up on was very different than the horror we get today. First of all, it hardly ever had black characters. And if there
Right.
were black characters, you kind of wish there weren't because of all the stereotypes and, what we would call cooning now, which was just what people had to do.
Right.
Hollywood had an image of what blackness was. And if you didn't fit that image, you didn't get cast, period. So,
Facts.
especially in the studio movies. So, what I learned from her was how to extract the experience without seeing myself, if that makes any sense. Like these
Mm,
characters don't remind me of myself. I'm watching, Frankenstein. There's nobody there who particularly reminds me of myself, except maybe Frankenstein's monster a little bit. Frankenstein's
mm,
monster is an outcast, misunderstood. All he's trying to
hmm.
do is give a little girl a flower, and there's a mob after,
Right.
And
Can't even be nice.
I think for a lot of us who feel like we've been pushed to the margins and pushed outside of society, that is definitely one of the things that probably appealed to my mom is that she saw herself reflected in those who are reviled and
Mhm.
those who are rejected. And it's not that you're rooting for the monster, but like a good example is like, oh, this is a fun one because I used to watch this as a kid. It's a black and white one. And yes, it was a rerun. I did not see it when it first came out, but it's from the 1950s called The Mole People.
Hmm.
And I haven't seen it since I was a kid, or I hadn't. So I decided to rewatch it again a couple years ago. And I'm like, what the heck did I ever see in this movie? Like all these white researchers on a long hike. I mean, this hike went on forever, where they're just talking. It's so dry. It's so boring. What appealed to me? Why did I watch this?
Right.
Then they got inside the tunnel and they found the mole people. Well, guess what? The mole people were being forced to dig. They were being forced to work. They were being whipped.
Hmm.
There was, I think, a deliberate slavery metaphor. I'm not trying to say these producers were super woke, but
Right.
Hollywood does try to pat itself on the back for like these messages and they're all white movies. Like they don't bother to
Right.
cast anybody, but they're like want to pat themselves on the back for like, oh, they're being treated like they're enslaved, you know?
Right.
But
Right.
that was what I saw. And I bet that was what my mom saw. Again, I was relating to the experience of the monster. And in that movie, believe you me, I was definitely rooting for those mole people to have an uprising. Okay. Yes.
Right. Growing up, did y'all have any family traditions or like superstitions or folklore that also influence your love? Because I think, like for me, every Halloween since I was a kid, I get all my favorite snacks. I watch all my scary movies from sun up to sundown. So, like, did y'all have any traditions like that?
It's so funny you asked that because all I remember is that my mom was that house that doesn't give away candy. My mom would give away little pads and pencils. It's a wonder
Mm-hmm.
we did not get toilet paper wrapped around our house every year because she wasn't that one who's like, oh, all that sugar is bad for you. Here's something healthy. Here's
Oh, she was one
something
of
for
those mamas.
school. And I think just because we were watching horror movies all the time, we didn't set it aside as like a special time of year to watch horror because
Hmm.
to this day, I celebrate horror all the time. I could watch a horror movie every day. I'm reading horror
Me too.
quite a lot, not all the time, but a lot of the time. So no, not around Halloween, but my mother enjoyed horror movies very, very, very late into her life.
Mm. Now, being that you are a strong voice in the genre, what do you think distinguishes between Black horror and from traditional horror? And why do you think it's so important for our culture?
Oh, yes, another great question. I
Getting
because
my Oprah on.
I teach a whole course at UCLA called The Sunken Place,
Hmm.
Racism, Survival, and the Black Horror Aesthetic, which is supposed to be like, what is horror? What is Black horror? And of course, the beautiful thing about it is you can probably guess one thing I'm going to say is it's not the same for every Black creator.
Right.
There's Black horror that is Get Out, which
Hmm.
is social justice horror. Racism itself is the monster. The whole
Hmm.
movie is basically about white supremacy and being caught in the web of white supremacy. That's one version. And then
Hmm.
there's a movie called Sweetheart, directed by J.D. Dillard, about a biracial woman stuck on an island with a creature. Now,
Oh, I gotta watch that.
yeah, oh, you've got to watch that. I love creature movies. There are not many creature movies, certainly not enough creature movies with black leads, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
So there's that. There's a little bit of pinch of race because the white companions she discovers don't believe her,
Of
which is
course.
one of my biggest pet peeves in horror, all horror, not just black horror, is gaslighting. Ooh, I cannot stand it.
Yeah,
I
facts.
am a grown, sober person. Like, you know
Hmm.
how you see a husband and wife in a movie, and the wife is sure she just heard a noise, and the husband's like, oh, honey, it must be your imagination. Listen, that next scene better be a fight.
Right.
Because if my husband tries to tell me, like, I am a rational person, I am an adult. And even if I was 5 years old, if my son told me he heard something under his bed, you best believe I would be there with a flashlight,
Right. And a
right?
knife.
And thank you. Bring the knife too, because ooh, the gaslighting. So in Sweetheart, there's a little bit of that gaslighting, and because she's the only black character, it does feel like it's a little bit about race. It does, or even maybe that she's a black woman, even.
Yeah.
But there are all kinds of black horror. I like to say that it's revolutionary to have a black lead in horror, period.
Yeah.
Like it
Facts.
doesn't matter how blackety black they are. A lot of my characters grew up in the suburbs. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's about representing our experience and of course sometimes aspects of real life. Like I did a graphic novel called The Keeper with my husband, Stephen Barnes, illustrated by
Hmm.
Marco Finnegan.
Y'all, she
Actually,
flexing, y'all. She flexing.
hey, Steve and I wrote it as a script first.
Uh-huh.
We came really close to getting it made, and then the studio backed down and it never got made. But as a graphic novel, it has a new life. And it's just an 8-year-old girl who is orphaned and her grandmother dies. And her
Mm,
grandmother told her, stay out of the system, whatever you do. And she gave her a real good reason to stay out of the system. She told her a story about something that happened to her when she was in the system. So
mm,
the girl just lets the grandmother stay in her room, doesn't tell anybody she's dead, but grandma conjured a creature to take care of her called the Keeper. Now, this is an intergenerational creature because the grandmother's father also conjured that creature to take care of her. So there's a
mm.
little bit of history of the Black experience with policing is a little bit sprinkled in there.
Right.
The Black experience with the system is a little bit sprinkled in there. Well, where the system will literally take children out of a home that is struggling
Mm-hmm.
and pay strangers to take
Just
care of your children.
and that's scary as hell.
Excuse me, what?
Right.
But that's sort of contempt that the system has for an intact Black family. It's just like, we're just going to disrupt this family. Money could have solved y'all's problem, but we're going to give the money to somebody else. So there's a little bit of contemporary issues in the story, but it's mostly just what I like to say is getting to the universal through the specific, right? So
Right.
through this very specific story about this kind of child living in Detroit, struggling with, now that she's lost her parents, she's lost that wealth that her parents also, might have
Mm-hmm.
passed to her. Um, but the universal story is just, at what point do you become the monster?
Mm.
Even if you're just a child, if you have a creature taking care of you and that creature is doing things, that creature's not just, cleaning up the house while you're at school. I mean, it does do that, but it does more than that. It
Right.
feeds off of life force around you. At what point is she the monster? That's the point
Mm.
of that story. And I think, to answer your question sort of more specifically, some of the things that we see typically in Black horror, even though, as I've said, there's all kinds, ancestors appear in Black horror, and
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't necessarily mean ghosts that are scary. That could mean ancestors for guidance, because I
Mm-hmm.
think the African American community sometimes has a different relationship to ancestors.
Yeah.
So we see ancestors retribution, trying to right a wrong through magic. I wrote a
Yeah.
I wrote a story called The Rider, which is in Jordan Peele's book, Out There Screaming. It's a whole anthology of Black horror stories.
That's on my list. I've been wanting to get that book for so long, so now I need to order it.
It's a really great example of how there is no one thing that is Black horror. I mean, N.K. Jemisin starts it off strong with some views on policing that does
Mm-hmm.
not hold back. But some of the stories, it's just like the characters happen to
Yeah.
be Black. And that I think is it's so liberating, because one of the dangers of Black horror, and I saw some of this, I'm not going to get too specific because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but maybe you can think of some examples of this as I'm telling you
Yeah.
that
I'm listening. Listen.
some people, when you get that megaphone, you get that platform, it's almost like that Roy Wood Jr. joke where he talks about the Civil Rights Museum guy. If he's a Black guy, by the end of the day, he's like, "Look what you did to us."
Right.
It's like you want to make the history itself the horror. But if you delve too far that direction, it becomes what people call trauma porn, and
Mm-hmm.
it re-traumatizes instead of healing, right? So if
Right.
you look at the pilot of Lovecraft Country is
Oh
definitely
my
playing.
God. We're so in sync because I was literally thinking about Lovecraft Country.
Well, it's so in that lane, right? Like that scary empty road and the headlights. Shoo, that's like out of my parents' stories. That's out of my
Right.
nightmares. The sundown town, the police chasing you out of the diner. That's some of the scariest stuff in the episode, but it's not unwatchable because we don't have to watch a lynching. We don't,
Mm-hmm.
in fact, right when you're starting to maybe feel like you're gonna get triggered, monsters appear.
Right.
And it's the fantasy element that makes it fun to watch. And I think sometimes newer horror creators who get that platform and they were like, oh, finally, we're going to get some Black horror. They forget that it's supposed to be entertainment. And the
Yeah.
question is entertaining for who? Right? Like,
That
because
part.
I have seen some Black horror that was not entertaining, that was just based on racist violence as the horror. I get it that racist violence is horror. I get it that lynching is horrific, but I'm not going to watch a lynching for fun. I'm not naming any names.
Okay, okay,
I'm
okay.
trying to work in this town.
Okay,
Um,
okay. I'll take that out there. But yeah.
but you can probably think of examples from films and television where the racist violence went too far. And everybody has a
Yeah.
different level where it's going to feel like too far for you. But I think there's some that are pretty like that would be too far for
Because
just about anybody.
if I'm thinking of one particular movie and that was a lot. That it was intense. I'm like, I don't want to see this. Like,
Yeah, and I think that the confusing thing, that's what's brilliant about the remake of Candyman, or not the sequel, rather, the spiritual sequel to Candyman that Nia DaCosta directed,
oh, that was amazing.
that Monkey Paw put out, because, as I'm going to be telling my class on Tuesday of next week, there's a whole bunch of problematic stuff in the original Candyman. I love it. It's scary as heck, but it has some problematic issues, mainly that it's Black trauma through a white lens. If I had to summarize it, that would be the main issue, that it's like
Hmm.
supposed to be based around Black trauma, but why aren't we telling the story?
And
And why
why is
is
he killing us
why is he killing
in the
us?
hood? He should be killing them.
So the new Candyman, which I like to call Candyman Reclamation,
Hmm.
tells the story of Black trauma through a Black lens. It makes Cabrini Green like a neighborhood in the flashbacks instead of just like some kind of like trashy set, which is what it was in the original. And it's like they weren't even real people; they were kind of like props.
Right,
You could see in the new Candyman, oh, he's doing his laundry. This is a neighborhood. This is what
right.
like families live here.
It
That's
looks
just
real.
one small thing, but the main thing was when it's describing a scene of violence, it went to that animated puppetry. Like instead of
Hmm.
watching somebody get hurt by violent racists, it's a very sort of stylized rendering of Candyman's story that is not triggering. And it
Hmm.
helps you stay in that once upon a time storytelling state rather than flinching because it reminds you of something you saw in the news last week or something that happened to your grandfather.
Right. Right. Now you got me thinking because I'm thinking about the ending when Tony Todd appears and you speaking about how like ancestors come back to sort of right their wrong. So is that what he was doing in the end?
Yes, I think that the original spirit of Candyman, who inexplicably was killing his own people
Right, right,
in the first movie, is announcing himself as an avenging angel.
right.
And
Hmm.
that line, when I first heard that line, tell everyone, I was like, I felt goosebumps
Right.
because it's like, tell everyone I will be here to beat that ass if you have an issue. Like if like yeah, he basically killed a whole bunch of police officers at the end of the movie, which in the wake of George Floyd and it was actually shot before that and then delayed
Mm.
in COVID and all that. But that was the spirit, that everybody there was even a character named Brianna, in the new Candyman.
Yeah.
So that Black Lives Matter theme was very strong, but also this revenge. So that's something you see in Black horror, like revenge, not revenge, it's called Tales from the Hood
Oh, that was a classic,
from the
man.
90s.
Yeah. And that
All
was
about
scary when I was a
revenge.
kid. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all about trying to take power when we don't have it in real life, when it's
Yeah.
revenge horror. But that's, again, there's so many different kinds. And of course, voodoo appears in some Black horror or root magic and, conjuring, that kind of thing. We see
Hmm.
it. It can be overdone and it
Hmm.
can be done badly. But there's also great projects that use that too.
I'm just curious because I was a fan of Lovecraft Country. So what were your thoughts when you heard that they was canceled?
I was disappointed,
Me
of
too.
course. I think that there were some classic moments in
Hmm.
Lovecraft Country. Some of them had nothing to do with horror, like just seeing grown folks in bed together, like
Yeah.
grown Black people in bed, like, that was with Courtney B. Vance. And I never got over the loss of him in the series.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those twins were super scary in the Emmett Till episode.
Yeah. It just
Mopsy
had
and
so many
Flopsy.
breadcrumbs in it. Like it made you want to go back and read on history about our people. For me, it did.
It's just, I think in our current environment, TV shows are not getting the chance they used to.
Hmm.
And it's very common, unfortunately, for shows to be canceled after a single season. You might as well have just called it a limited series then, if that's what you're going to do.
Right.
And then more artists would be able to wrap up the story, because clearly Lovecraft Country felt like it could go in like a whole different
So many different ways.
direction at the
Yeah.
end. But yeah, it was disappointing, but honestly not surprising.
Yeah. Facts. Now, what's a horror film you think everyone should watch to better understand Black experiences? through the genre lenses.
All right. Now, Get Out is my usual standard answer.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to say Get Out. But, and hear me out on this, The Blackening. The Blackening.
Mm,
Dwayne Perkins just spoke to my class virtually. And
that's so cool.
he is a really bright brother, actually. And he co-wrote the movie. So he didn't just star in it, he co-wrote it. And what I love about The Blackening is that it is such blackety black horror. I mean, it's like it's got the tongue-in-cheek references to the things that we as audience members say we would never do, like let's not split up. There's a whole
Right,
joke
right.
around that. Like, because we're watching the movie going, what is wrong with these people? You know, so it carries our sensibility into the story.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's literally a Juneteenth themed movie,
Right.
they incorporate Black history into this game in a way that I truly appreciate. Like the second verse to lift every voice and sing. Now, I admit I would have been dead, but I would have got them like first verse and third verse. I could have handled that, but it's that second verse I don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know how to play spades, you don't know how to play bidwist. But all this is just sort of their historical references, their
Mm-hmm.
cultural references. The movie makes a point, I think, a very strong point, again, that Blackness is not a monolith because these are all very different characters. One
Yeah.
woman is biracial. One of the characters is his family is from the continent of Africa. One
Mm-hmm.
of them was kind of a thug back in the day, but he's loosened up. I mean, there are all these different personality types. And it's not only is it fun, but it's actually scary. So I'm gonna say, obviously Get Out, but don't sleep on The Blackening.
So would you say Get Out had the most significant impact on the genre?
Woo, it really did. It
Yeah.
really did. It's even hard to explain the difference between the pre-Get Out world and the post-Get Out world,
What a difference.
especially when it came to pitching and cinema. Like, believe me, I've been publishing since 95. I'm 1995. I've been pitching since 1995.
Mm.
And the executives would say to your face, "Oh, I love that idea, but do the characters have to be Black?" I mean, they would
Mm.
literally say that instead of just thinking it, which I actually appreciate when people say things out loud. But that's where
Yeah.
their heads were at because there was no demonstrated market for Black horror.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most, I think it's a difficult watch, but it's a masterful film, Beloved,
Oh,
which
beloved.
stars Oprah Winfrey and was directed by Jonathan Demme. I think unfortunately it just didn't make its budget back. It was an expensive movie. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
horror, like Get Out was 4.5 million.
Yeah.
So of course Get Out made its money back. And I think if Beloved had been closer to like 20 million, but it's hard with a historical. You got to have all these like all these sets and old costumes, and it's expensive to make period pieces. So Beloved, and that was what Hollywood thought of first. Like I used to pitch, and they would say, "Oh, like Beloved,"
Mm.
and in Hollywood speak, that means we're going to lose our shirts. Like we're like, and executives are very risk averse. They get
Right.
fired when they make decisions that lose money for the company. So it's so easy for execs to say no, 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 no to Black creators. But after Get Out, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a combination of things. There's Get Out, there's Black Panther, and George Floyd. Between all those things,
That's when
there
people
were
started liking Black people.
over liking, like out of their way,
Right.
like inserting Blackness where
Right.
where
Raising
just
fists up with the Kunta Kinte clown.
just I mean, and of course they go overboard on one way and then they want to snap back to the way it was. So we're in the snap back time.
Oh, we definitely in the snapback time.
We're like, that was cute. That was a cute experiment. But I will say this, even though it has snapped back, and when I say that, I mean it is once again difficult to
Mhm.
mount projects with Black leads. It's not nearly as difficult as it was before Get Out and Black Panther. I have to give credit. Jordan Peele opened doors he didn't even know he was opening. He opened
Yeah.
doors for like we did that Black horror documentary on Shudder. It got the green light the
Yeah.
day he won his Oscar. And then they
Mm.
followed up with Queer for Fear, which was a queer creators are getting doors open. Indigenous creators are getting doors open. I mean,
Yeah.
look at where indigenous horror is, or indigenous people, period, because you
Yeah.
never saw
Facts.
them except in historicals, playing historical roles. Now we see contemporary indigenous people in all kinds of projects. And I really do credit, especially in horror, I do credit Get Out for opening a lot of minds in terms of what can and cannot be profitable. Because trust me, that's all they are thinking about is, will this make
Yeah.
money?
When I was a little girl, my grandma used to always tell me about how, and to the white listeners, not y'all, but my grandma used to always tell me how white people back in the day, or even now in the black market, they'll take our different body parts and all these things like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot, you just woke up a memory.
Remember, it like she used
Ooh.
to always tell me this when I was a kid. And I'm like, Nana, what are you talking about? So my grandmother passed 10 years, almost 10 years ago. But when I saw Get Out, all these conversations that she used to have with me were coming back. And I'm like, yo, this is crazy. And to let me know that, okay, I'm not the only one who heard this.
But yes, and you know what? The memory that came back for me was when I first got my driver's license, maybe 16, 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I said I would be willing to donate my body parts to science if I was in an accident, because you can check that box.
Yeah, I said no.
She said, no, you
Yep.
should never check, because in her mind, they would let you die to take your
Yeah,
body parts.
absolutely.
So,
Ain't that
yes,
crazy?
it is crazy.
Yeah.
And between that, the Tuskegee experiment, we're like, we ain't messing
Yeah.
with the medical system.
Yeah. Why do you think so many black people don't like horror movies or scary movies? And the reason why I ask because I feel like all these movies like Candyman, Ease by You, Beloved, Get Out, they all are talk about the collective fears of black communities. So why do you think black people don't like scary shit?
I don't know any black people who don't like scary shit.
I'm
All
the
my
only
friends,
one.
all my friends love horror,
I'm
but
the only one that likes scary movies.
well, I will tell you an experience I had on book tour, and that might help answer the question. Because when I started publishing in the 90s, I had a book called The Living Blood, which is about Ethiopian immortals. They're
Mm-hmm.
like the opposite of vampires. People want to steal their blood because it can heal any ailment, one drop,
Right.
right? So it had a cover of this figure covered with bees. And as I think about it, I probably was influenced by Candyman. And I think about how I use bees in that story, but people were taking that book cover off when they were reading the book. And I
Mm.
do think that, and this is a broad statement, I do think that because so many of us have come from such a deep religious background,
Mm-hmm.
there is an actual fear that reading some of these horror stories is inviting forces into your life, you
Right.
know? I think that might be part of it. Like I didn't grow up with my grandmother throwing salt or with red clay dirt or any of that stuff. There was no folk beliefs that were
Mm-hmm.
part of my upbringing, but for a lot of people they were.
Yeah,
They
true.
brought them from the islands, they brought so I think that might have something to do with it.
And the Caribbean people, they not messing with that scary shit. Okay, so I'm just curious, what is your favorite scary movie of all time?
Oh, come. Oh, that's so hard. The favorite.
Both
Oh.
black and traditional.
Okay, so I get two then.
Mm-hmm.
Get Out's always my favorite for Black. It's
Mm-hmm.
just going to have to be that way for a while.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard. I mean, it literally had an impact on my life. I got my first TV credit from Jordan Peele. Steve and I wrote a Twilight Zone episode, season 2, episode 8, A Small Town. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like all up in Get Out. And plus, I teach a course about it. You can watch it 800 times. In terms of traditional non-Black horror, my favorite, the scariest, or the one I go back. I think, all right,
Both.
here's how I'm gonna do it. Probably it could be The Exorcist.
Okay,
I
that's a
love
good one.
children in horror. It's an Exorcist 3. Don't sleep on that one. Skip the second one, but the third one also very scary. Um, but if I have to be honest about the one that had the most impact on me in the theaters, because The Exorcist was a little bit before my time in terms of seeing it in the movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the one I saw in the theater that really got under my skin was Nightmare on Elm Street. Wes
Oh,
Craven.
Freddie was
Yeah.
hands down. Yeah.
That idea that something could attack you while you're dreaming. Oh, how do you fight that?
And his storyline was amazing.
Yes. So I think
Love.
Nightmare on Elm Street would have to be my number one, just traditional scary movie, and Get Out is my favorite Black movie.
I think for me, my favorite traditional hands down Halloween.
Oh, of course, of course.
Love Halloween. I love the fact that we got to see the ending of it. Like there's no more. That's it.
Right.
And I think for Black, I would have to say, I don't know, maybe either obviously Get Out or Eve's Bayou.
Eve's Bayou is a beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful, and very disturbing film. You know, when I first saw Eve's Bayou, and I did see that in theaters, and we were so spoiled in the 90s, by the way.
we
Like
were.
we just thought this is how it was gonna be.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? We didn't know. We didn't know they were gonna reel that line back in. And we weren't going to
Right.
have any more Black movies in the 2000s for a long time. It was really bad until 2017, really, till we started having more Black movies. But back in the day, I saw Eve's Bayou in the theater, and it
Mm.
so disturbed me that I never watched it again until I started teaching my Black horror class.
Oh,
And
wow.
isn't that crazy? Because now I look at it, it's like beautifully shot.
Yeah.
I can't believe Casey Lemons got to direct. Well, that was the 90s, man. You just like people getting opportunities, people getting chances.
Hmm.
How she found these young actors. I mean, this whole
Yeah.
movie rests on a child actor, and that is my jam, you know.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what is her first name? Smollett. What is her first name? Tell me.
Journey.
Journey Smollett. Like
Yeah.
just introducing Journey Smollett, and she was already a fully formed young actor. She carries that movie
She did.
beautifully. And then she got Samuel L. Jackson. Y'all don't even know. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson was like the biggest box office star, or one of them in the world when he took that
Yeah.
part. And it is not a very flattering part. It is like not gonna make you leave the theater feeling super good about him.
Right, right.
And
Why did it disturb you so much?
I think it's that incest theme, you know, because that's the part of the movie. Like some people don't even consider Eve's Bayou horror; they consider it a drama. But I think it is horror because, well, first of all, horror is an emotion, and it fills me
Right.
with horror. Like when Journey is sitting on his lap, I'm like, this is horrific. Not because of supernatural reasons, but there are enough hints at mysticism and the supernatural that her aunt has future sight. She can literally see the future except for herself.
Right.
And you wonder, did this girl really curse her father? You don't know for sure if it was her curse or his bad choices that
Hmm.
led to his death. But when you mix that in with that question of what really happened between this father and daughter, and just enough, like where you're like just about to like close your eyes, I can't watch this anymore, that you cut away and the rest is imagination, like and it really rests. I don't think it's too spoilery. I mean, y'all should have seen the movie by now,
Oh yeah,
but
they should. You gotta
I
see it by
think
now.
it's such a beautiful film, and it's so rich that even if I tell you this, it just better prepares you to see it. Like, who kissed whom first? Did this
Right.
child kiss her father, or did his father kiss
Kiss
his
his
child?
child.
And that is a question I'm still trying to answer. And I've seen it about a half dozen times.
Mm, damn, that is whew. So why do you think horror is such an effective medium for conveying these deep social issues? Because I didn't even think about that. And I've seen this movie 1,000 times, but technically that was incest.
Right. Well, but through that lens of just enough of that mysticism, and it doesn't quite hit the same way. There was a study during COVID that was published in the New York Times, basically saying that people who love horror tended to cope better under a crisis situation.
Well,
And I
yeah,
think it's because we're
because I'd
always
be stressed out.
we are rehearsing for catastrophe all the time, right?
Right.
Like it's not a shock when things go wrong. On one level, I kind of expected people to be bursting through my house during the last presidency, because people were losing their minds and feeling
Right.
empowered and enabled and just proud with their racism. So if a mob of angry racists had broken into my house, I would have been sort of shocked in the moment, but not surprised. Like, of course, it's like right on time. And I would have my plan. I know where my baton flashlight is. I can knock somebody over the head. I know
Hmm.
where I keep the steak knives in the kitchen. I'm not going to be, or at least in your head, you think I'm not going to be one of those people who trips and falls and just
Hmm.
covers my head and screams. I'm going to be one of those people who has sense enough to hide, which not enough horror characters do, by the way. Like,
Right.
especially if you're running in the woods at night. Are you kidding me? You have
Right.
so many places you could hide. Just
Like
stay
if you
right
don't pop a
there.
squat and sit down somewhere and be
What are
quiet.
you doing? Why are you on the road? That's like the one place he's gonna look.
Right.
But I think so. We're rehearsing these survival behaviors in our head, but we're doing them in a safe context because nothing can hurt us or touch us from a movie. I
Yeah.
have a harder
Hmm.
time reading news. I have a harder time with true crime. You know, I
Yeah.
I shoot, I made the mistake of watching that documentary about Jared from Subway. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, how am I gonna wash that out of my head? That was something I did not need to put myself through. But a
Yeah.
horror movie, I think, and it happened with my mother, I think too, is that when you see these scares on a screen, it helps validate the part of you that knows that horror is real, right? Like
Mm.
maybe Dracula's not real, but that fear people feel when they're around tragedy, loss, chaos, that is real. And so it
Yeah.
validates us. It validates our fear experience when we see monsters and zombies and ghosts, and we can kind of exhale,
You know,
breathe it out.
we are so in sync because that's my next question. Do you think Black audience find therapeutic value in watching Black horror? And I agree. I feel like when you can validate your fears, it makes you feel more comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and Get Out is one way. I mean, it can be like, okay, this movie perfectly describes how some people might feel at work, like they're the only Black person at work. And there's something about Get Out that scratches that itch just right. Like, so you can kind of laugh at it. You can see it through a different prism. The same thing with being chased. I mean, I don't
Hmm.
know. I've been very blessed. I have never been through a trauma where someone was chasing me. And
Yeah, I
I
don't want to be
honestly,
I don't want to go through that either.
yeah, I nobody wants to do that for real. I have
Right.
heard people who have been abused say that they do find it therapeutic, so I will take their word for it, but that's not where I'm coming from. My traumas were more societal traumas, being raised by civil rights activists, knowing too much, hearing too much, you know.
Yeah.
Um, that seeing my mother's trauma from her activism and the dark glasses she wore, that was my trauma. It was almost like sort of residual trauma from them that was also touching me. But I do feel like, especially for Black, like if you are listening to this and you've never really given this any thought, like you may not have even seen Get Out, start with that one. Frankly, there are a lot of good ones. There's one called His House,
Hmm.
which is an immigration story
That
horror.
was on Netflix, right?
Yes,
Yeah, I saw
yes.
that one. Yeah.
That was really, really good. It's not set in the United States, but it's also Black horror.
Hmm.
Sweetheart, like I said, J.D. Dillard is just a creature story on an island, happens to have a Black lead. That's it.
Hmm.
Just try some of these movies out for size and see if it doesn't help you, because I swear horror can be very healing.
But do you think there is a danger in overexposing Black audience to horror narratives that center on Black pain and trauma?
Well, that goes to the trauma porn piece.
Right.
It's a hard line to walk because horror movies famously always have loss in them.
Hmm.
So, for certain kinds of horror stories, like a family on vacation horror story, if that's a Black family or any family, let's say, but especially a Black family, no one is expendable. Like,
Yeah.
even the dog
Everybody getting
is not
it.
expendable, like, because there's no, like, this is what Dwayne Perkins said, like, he was walking a line with the blackening because you want it to be horror, but he didn't. This is a friend group.
Yeah.
How do you kill off one of these characters that we love so much? And I do, the double-edged sword is it does cut deeper and harder when the
Hmm.
character who dies looks like you. That's the secret. Now, I don't know if that's true for white audiences because for the history of forever horror, most of the victims have been white people. Do
Hmm.
they take that as personally as I do? I doubt it somehow because it's so unusual. Like when a Black character shows up, that's when I noticed that they kill the Black guy off like immediately, or
Right.
they made it a spectacle death so all the white characters could be horrified and be like, "We will avenge you." But but I feel it deeper. So that's why I think it's so important, A, to be mindful of how you treat those characters, who, if someone's going to die, who's going to die and how they're going to die,
Mm-hmm.
but also not, if it does happen, to make sure it happens because of a fantasy element. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can watch people killed by zombies all day long. I
Right.
don't want to watch a lynching once.
Yeah. I don't want to
Yeah,
see that.
nobody
But
wants
what
to see that.
but you know what? I was thinking about like what kind of impact do you think black horror has on like white people? Like I always wonder, like, do they get what we get? Like, do they see what we see? And I know they probably won't always fully understand because they're not black, but I always wonder, like, when they see Get Out, like, what are their thoughts? Like, have you ever had a conversation with somebody?
Oh my gosh, when Get Out came out, I must have done 5 or 6 panel discussions. A lot of them in front of mostly white audiences, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
One at like a very hoity-toity private school, and it was like I mean, honestly, some of the experiences are not going to hit the same way, and they might
Right.
find humor in some situations where a black viewer doesn't think that's funny.
Ain't
You know
shit
what I
funny.
mean?
Right.
But it was interesting to watch kind of this enlightenment like floating over the audience. Like Jordan Peele would said when he came to my class once, people like white people watch the movie go, dang, I did bring up Tiger Woods that time. Because one of the things that happens in Get Out is the white characters are struggling for things to say, especially Dean, the father. He's like, oh, okay, black boyfriend, I want to look cool. I
Right.
would have voted for Obama for a third term if just out of nowhere. We were not
Right.
talking about politics, sir. But the only thing he could think to say was like to mention some random black person, right? Like,
Right.
so that's something that happens when
That
in
we
social
all know.
situations. And
Right.
like white people like, oh, I brought up Tiger Woods. I shouldn't have said, I see. Okay, I did do that. And I am like this person at the party who's asking Chris all these personal questions. And so I do think that white audiences can absorb it. I think that a white audience would really love the blackening. I mean, the reason these movies are succeeding so much, make no mistake, is because they are crossing over to a white audience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned comedy. So I feel like horror and comedy, they often overlap, especially in films like Get Out. So what role do you think humor plays in black horror and how does it enhance or shift the tone of the genre?
I love a good humor line in horror.
Me
Comedy
too.
horror is hard to pull off. It's very hard to pull off because either it's not funny or
Yeah.
it's not scary, you know? And I think The Blackening is both funny and scary. I think Get Out has both humor and scariness as
Mm-hmm.
well. And Jordan Peele talked about this when he Skyped in. I also have, by the way, an online version of my Black horror class that anybody can take. And
Oh, I'm
because he
already taking it, y'all.
because he had come into my classroom for my UCLA class. Now this is going to date me, but this was back in Skype. Remember Skype?
Yeah,
He actually
yeah,
Skyped in to talk to me and Stephen Barnes, my husband, and we talked about that, literally that relationship between horror and humor. Because, some of y'all may not remember, but nobody knew Jordan Peele liked horror. I mean, he was on Key and Peele, he was on Mad TV. They did a few like little horror sci-fi sketches, but
yeah. Mm-hmm.
we really did not have a lot of warning that he
Yeah,
was
I feel
going to
like he just popped out.
popped out the gate and like, oh shoot. But for him, like you said, it is kind of two sides to a coin. And the way he described it is the way you set up a laugh and the way you set up a scream are very similar because you're going against the audience expectations.
Right.
That's what makes it funny is that you said something no one expected you to say. Just like a jump scare is scary because you weren't expecting that to happen. So he sees it very clearly as part of the same thing. I think the function of humor in horror also gives the audiences a moment to breathe and
Mm-hmm.
relax, let their guard down, because you don't
Yeah.
want that guard up the whole time. You don't want to be tense the whole time. You want to have at least a minute. Whew, you breathe it out, and then you're primed up for the next jump scare.
Yeah. Now, what role does Black horror play in challenging long-standing stereotypes such as the magical Negro or the or the Black sidekick in both horror and broader genres?
Wow. When horror noir came out in 2019 and it was received so well by the horror community, I thought the horror community would be mad because we were kind of like scolding, like, look what y'all doing to us. Like,
Right,
and talking
right.
about all these tropes, first to die, sacrificial Negro. That's the one that gets me. Like, you think I'm gonna risk my life or give my life for you, random white person I don't even know in the movie, like Annabelle. I love the Annabelle movies, but that first one,
Mm-hmm.
why did Alfred Woodard grab that doll and jump out of the window to save those people she barely knew?
Please.
Why? And I think there hasn't been enough of an interrogating of that question, why? And it's a pretty ugly answer. No shade to any individual filmmaker, because I don't think anyone's doing it consciously.
Mm-hmm.
But way back in 1915, when D.W. Griffith made a movie called Birth of a Nation, there were two kinds of Black people:
That's the movie. Yep.
monsters
Mm-hmm.
who will chase you through the woods and try to take your women, Black people, white actors in blackface pretending to be monstrous Black men, or
Mm.
faithful servants. And I really feel like that faithful servant trope, that mammy trope, that feeling like, oh, they're not mad at us over everything that happened, they forgive us,
Yeah.
is what drives that sacrificial Negro trope. Like really wanting to believe in your heart of hearts that I
Mm.
deserve for you to give your life for me.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of privilege? So it
Like
comes
I
from,
don't want to live.
yeah, I don't want to screw my life. I'm gonna save
Right.
you. And Rachel True was hysterical because she was in
The craft.
The Craft, and she
Mm-hmm.
said when she was, an actress coming up, like all the scripts she got were for sort of a sassy best friend, and her dialogue was different ways of saying, "Are you okay? Are you
Yeah.
okay? Are you okay?" Like she said she had to learn a million ways to say that because that was her role. She was relegated to a side role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's happening now when you have Black actors in the lead
Mm-hmm.
is obviously we get to subvert all of those tropes. The blackening does it like intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
It's playing with the white savior trope. It's playing with fear of policing. It's playing with a lot of old horror tropes. But, surviving is still revolutionary. Not having to sacrifice yourself is revolutionary. Just
Yeah.
honestly, being a person with a family, like no shade again, if you remember the first season of Stranger Things, who did not
Mm.
have a family?
Of course. The
The
little
little
black
black
boy.
boy. Exactly. And it's not, again, I don't think it's intentional. It's just
But
to a
why do you think we
degree.
don't see that?
Well, they don't see it. They don't see it. And I mean, they corrected it. And even Fear the Walking Dead started out shaky season one. I mean, pilot, even
Yeah.
white people were calling that pilot racist.
And you know when
Okay.
white people get riled up.
But they corrected it. And I think, I give people credit for fixing issues. I give people credit for changing. So
Yeah.
I don't want to harp on it too much, but I thought it was a wrap after Horror Noir and we told people all these tropes, keep away from these. I thought they would go away. Like, no, that's not what happened. Like a new generation of filmmakers comes up, they're still watching the same old movies from
Yeah.
back in the day. And what do you know? Here's a new movie that has a sacrificial Negro first to die trope, and nobody even thinking about it.
Right, right. And speaking of Rachel True, because when I was watching Horror New York, I was like, what about the representation of Black women in horror? Like I feel like we're never fully represented in these movies. And there's not a lot of us in these movies.
No. There are some standouts like Jada Pinkett Smith and Demon Knight
That was
that
good. Yeah.
Ernest Dickerson directed, and Sweetheart is one. Us, obviously, Jordan Peele intentionally wanted to create a role, a powerful role for a Black woman of Lupita Nyong'o's stature as an
Mm-hmm.
actor. But yeah, there's not enough. I would absolutely agree. And that's why I'm gonna keep trying to get my movies made, get
Well, we're
my
gonna
TV
help
shows
you.
made.
We're gonna definitely support you.
So listen, I was talking about my Sunken Place class and Jordan Peele came and talked to it. It's at sunkenplaceclass.com.
Mm-hmm.
Sunkenplaceclass.com. It's a digital download. You can take it at your own pace, and it's very much based on my UCLA course, and it does have that interview with Jordan Peele. It's like a time capsule now because he had not won his Oscar yet. He was just a baby Jordan Peele.
Do you ever look back in your life and just be like, nah, I'm really cool. Like you got Jordan Peele, you got Tony Todd,
I
Stephen
mean, this
King,
I
the
have
black
to I'm pretty proud of that Scare Up the Vote event that happened recently because that to me is sort of a testament to, I have been on this planet for a while and I have met a lot of people. And if I haven't met them, I know someone who has. And to be able
Yeah.
to gather all those people together. I mean, of course, we all want Kamala Harris to win the election, and we all had a lot of sense of purpose. But
Right.
it felt like one of those this is your life moments. It's like, oh my gosh, I know these people. A lot of these people, there are 25 more people I could have invited if we had more time. That
Yeah.
feels good to be a part of a community. And one thing I will say, all communities are problematic on some level and in some instances, but the horror community is so welcoming and loving. And I think it's because
Facts.
deep down we're all these we still remember being those scared little kids. We all
Hmm.
have similar journeys to horror, and I think we all have a lot of empathy. That's one of the things that came up again and again during the Scare Up the Vote campaign, which, by the way, if you missed it, you can still see it at scareupthevote.com. That's the replay link to see Stephen King in a conversation with his
Yes.
son Joe Hill. I don't even know that I've ever seen them in conversation together, but they were
I
there.
haven't.
They were
Yeah.
there. But we get each other. And the horror community overall has been very open
Hmm.
to new voices. And I think here's why. I think when you grow up loving horror, you've seen it all. You've seen the European castle monster story 100 times,
Yeah.
but you haven't seen foreign language horror like The Ring from Japan and all that. You haven't seen black horror. So I think because the whole notion of being scared relies on novelty and
Hmm.
surprise, there is nothing more exciting than stumbling on some horror from a different culture, a different perspective, and it
Yeah.
scares you in a deeper and different way.
Yeah. And as Black horror continues to expand, what stories or themes do you feel still need to be addressed in order to push the genre forward?
I think we just need more consistency, frankly. I'm all in favor of all the things. I want
Yeah.
to be surprised. I want to see more directors like Boots Riley, like who's doing Afro surrealism, like
Mm,
really pushing the horror space. Like what's the craziest thing I can see in Black horror? I would love to see more historical Black horror
me too.
because again, I don't want to see a lynching as horror. But if there's a creepy old tree in the backyard that does creepy things because it was a lynching tree, that's different,
Right.
right? That's
Mm.
different. So find
Oh, you might need to keep that one. That's a good one. I'm gonna take that one out. Just give me
find
10%.
like season it just a little bit with the
Yeah.
historical horror, but then open it up to a fantasy realm that helps us revisit and imagine sort of that historical horror without having to get
Right.
re-traumatized by it because nobody wants to do that.
Yeah. And last but not least, how would you like your work in Black horror to be remembered? What kind of legacy do you hope to leave in the genre?
I am honestly just still grateful to be publishing. After all these years, a lot of has come and gone. I've lost friends, Elin Harris, L.A. Banks, who were writers and contemporaries back in the 90s. Tina McElroy Ansa just passed away. So honestly, I'm just still happy to be here.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that my latest novel, The Reformatory, got the best reviews of my career, hands down. From the New York Times, it won the LA Times Book Prize. It got a Bram Stoker Award. First time. I've never gotten a Bram Stoker Award. I've never gotten a Shirley Jackson Award. So this book, which is historical horror set in the Jim Crow South, but it's a ghost story. So I was trying to practice what I preach. No
Mm-hmm.
lynchings. Yeah. I guess I want to be remembered. I hate saying that because I'm morbidly like obsessed with death. I'm not dying, frankly. But
Right.
if I have to put my mind there, I want people to be able to look at my work as something that moved them and touched them and taught them. Like, oh, I could write like the way Stephen King taught me the importance of characterization in storytelling.
Yeah.
I would like to think that other people would learn other craft lessons from me and remember me as a community builder. Like I was someone who helped try to bring the horror community together.
Yeah. Listen, y'all, when I tell y'all hands down, my audience knows I love scary shit. So to see someone that looks just like me to have this conversation, because I don't get to have this conversation at all with any of my friends, they think I'm crazy. It has been truly an honor. So I'm definitely about to order all your books. And when
Oh,
I
thank you.
and when I'm in LA, I'm gonna pull up on you so I can meet you in
That's
person.
fine.
But this has truly been such a pleasure to have you on the show. So I really appreciate you.
Really great to talk to you too. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Okay, one more question and I'm done because I'm like so fascinated with you. What's your favorite Stephen King scary
Ooh,
movie or book?
movie or book?
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny because he has so many iterations. Like there's old school Stephen King, there's new Stephen
Yeah.
King. My favorite new Stephen King is The Outsider, which a
Mm.
lot of people might not have caught.
Is
That
that
was
on
like
HBO?
it was, I believe so. It was like it was like a limited
A limited
series.
series. Yeah. Yeah.
Cynthia Erivo was in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is so good about that moment when you have to accept the supernatural. That's like my favorite moment in every horror movie is when the
Mm-hmm.
character who's gaslighting you finally believes you
Right.
and you figure out now what are we going to do? Like that's the meeting. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
it. Then what are we going to do? So The Outsider is my favorite contemporary, although his new short story collection, You Like It Darker, is also excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in terms of old school Stephen King, his scariest book to me was Pet Cemetery.
Yeah.
And I just
Yeah.
rewatched the Mary Lambert film where she literally was directing a 2-year-old baby. This baby was acting in her movie and he was acting, okay? It's a pretty good adaptation. That's his scariest one. There are so many great Stephen King adaptations and books, but I would say Pet Cemetery is the book I found just the scariest.
So obviously for me, the first it, that was hands down. Like I didn't really the new it, I was like, but the
Mm.
old it, fire. And also, what was the movie with the werewolf, the pastor or the preacher was a werewolf and
Salem's Lot?
Silver Bullet?
Oh, Silver Bullet. Silver Bullet, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love Silver Bullet. Love, love, love.
Great. Well, there's some, honestly, you could pick five, like your top five Stephen King,
Right, right.
because honestly, there's just so many, and that's why it was such a joy to do the event with him. And yeah, so thank you for having me on.
No, thank you. And to the listeners, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please make sure to email me at hello@thephdpodcast.com. And until next time, everyone, y'all know I'm like super excited and it's out on Halloween. So once again, thank you so much for coming into the show. And until next time, everyone, later. You
Thank
gonna say
you.
bye?
Bye
Oh.
bye.